Letter 29. To the Honourable Daines Barrington, Selborne, February 7, 1776. Dear Sir, in heavy fogs, on elevated situations especially, trees are perfect alembics, and no one that has not attended to such matters can imagine how much water one tree will distill in a night's time by condensing the vapour, which trickles down the twigs and boughs, so as to make the ground below quite in a float. In Newton Lane, in October 1775, on a misty day, a particular oak in leaf dropped so fast that the cartway stood in puddles, and the ruts ran with water, though the ground in general was dusty. In some of our smaller islands in the West Indies, if I mistake not, there are no springs or rivers, but the people are supplied with that necessary element, water, merely by the dripping of some large tall trees, which, standing in the bosom of a mountain, keep their heads constantly enveloped with fogs and clouds, from which they dispense their kindly never-ceasing moisture, and so render those districts habitable by condensation alone. Trees in leaf have such a vast proportion more of surface than those that are naked, that, in theory, their condensations should greatly exceed those that are stripped of their leaves. But, as the former imbibe also a great quantity of moisture, it is difficult to say which drip most. But this I know, that deciduous trees that are entwined with much ivy seem to distill the greatest quantity. Ivy leaves are smooth, and thick, and cold, and therefore condense very fast, and besides evergreens imbibe very little. These facts may furnish the intelligent with hints concerning what trees they should plant round small ponds that they would wish to be perennial, and show them how advantageous some trees are in preference to others. Trees perspire profusely, condense largely, and check evaporation so much that woods are always moist. No wonder, therefore, that they contribute much to pools and streams. That trees are great promoters of lakes and rivers appears from a well-known fact in North America. For, since the woods and forests have been grubbed and cleared, all bodies of water are much diminished, so that some streams, that were very considerable a century ago, will not now drive a common mill. Footnote. See Calm's Travels to North America. End footnote. Besides, most woodlands, forests, and chases with us abound with pools and morasses, no doubt for the reason given above. To a thinking mind, few phenomena are more strange than the state of little ponds on the summits of chalk hills, many of which are never dry in the most trying droughts of summer. On chalk hills, I say, because in many rocky and gravelly soils springs usually break out pretty high on the sides of elevated grounds and mountains. But no person acquainted with chalky districts will allow that they ever saw springs in such a soil, but in valleys and bottoms. Since the waters of so pervious a stratum as chalk all lie on one dead level, as well-diggers have assured me again and again. Now we have many such little round ponds in this district, and one in particular on our sheep-down, 300 feet above my house, which, though never above 3 feet deep in the middle, and not more than 30 feet in diameter, and containing perhaps not more than 200 or 300 hogsheads of water, yet never is known to fail, though it affords drink for 300 or 400 sheep, and for at least 20 head of large cattle beside. This pond, it is true, is overhung with 2 moderate beaches that, doubtless, at times afford it much supply. But then we have others as small that, without the aid of trees, and in spite of evaporation from sun and wind, and perpetual consumption by cattle, yet constantly maintain a moderate share of water, without overflowing in the wettest seasons, as they would do if supplied by springs. By my journal of May 1775, it appears that the small and even considerable ponds in the vales are now dried up, while the small ponds on the very tops of hills are but little affected. Can this difference be accounted for from evaporation alone, which certainly is more prevalent in bottoms? Or rather, have not those elevated pools some unnoticed recruits, which in the night-time counterbalance the waste of the day, without which the cattle alone must soon exhaust them? And here it will be necessary to enter more minutely into the cause. Dr. Hales, in his Vegetable Statics, advances from experiment that the moister the earth is, the more dew falls on it at night. Dr. Hales, in his Vegetable Statics, advances from experiment that the moister the earth is, the more dew falls on it in a night, and more than a double quantity of dew falls on a surface of water than there does on an equal surface of moist earth. Hence we see that water, by its coolness, is enabled to assimilate to itself a large quantity of moisture nightly by condensation, and that the air, when loaded with fogs and vapours, and even with copious dews, can alone advance a considerable and never-failing resource. Persons that are much abroad, and travel early and late, such as shepherds, fishermen, etc., can tell what prodigious fogs prevail in the night on elevated downs, even in the hottest parts of summer, and how much the surfaces of things are drenched by those swimming vapours, though, to the senses all the while, little moisture seems to fall. I am, etc.,